Farm for Profit Podcast. Take a listen, have a blast. Farm for Profit Podcast. Learn about farming while having a laugh. Farm for Profit Podcast.
So we've got really great guests, really experienced partnership that we have between Truterra and Primient. We start off on the end of the table with Laura. Laura leads sustainability at Primient. She's got almost 10 years of experience working in corporate sustainability. She's got her master's degree in sustainable management from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Well, we're in Wisconsin, so we can't say anything bad about that. You know, we're Iowa State Cyclone fans for any Big 12ers here in the room as far as that goes. We also have Greg here. Greg leads commercial and strategic partnerships on the team at Truterra, where he's responsible for building and implementing regenerative ag programs with food, fuel, feed, and fiber, the 4 Fs. And we want to welcome both of them. So let's give those two a hand before we jump into the conversation. Well, folks, it's teed up for you. Greg, let's start with you. I'll let you explain a little bit more about what your role is and who you are, and then we'll do the same for you, Laura.
Sure. So Greg Allard, as they mentioned. So what we're working with at Truterra is we're connecting our downstream partners, Primient and many others in the room that hopefully you guys have had a chance to meet over the last couple of days. And we're connecting them to our upstream customers, so growers through our ag retail network. And what we're really trying to do is help educate and sponsor different soil health programs.
Great. And Laura, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having us today. Laura Kowalski, I lead sustainability at Primient. For those of you that don't know, Primient's a relatively new organization, but we have really deep roots. So we've been a company for over 100 years, previously called the A.E. Staley Company, and then Tate & Lyle, and then in the last about year and a half broke out as Primient. And so what we do is corn wet milling, primarily breaking the kernel into starches and sweeteners. Leading in the food and beverage space. We've got a lot of customers in that space, as well as in the industrial starch space in paper and pulp.
That's great. So our goal today in this conversation is to kind of experience and explore the path beyond the producer. You know, we keep incentivizing and providing a lot of resources for farmers, the producers, to take on different types of cropping practices. And now we want to explore the down chain, the down the supply chain method as to why and where that impact is felt. So we're going to look at the partnership between Truterra and Primient and explore that a little bit more deeply. So to start off with, can you explain, and we'll start with you first, Greg, what the impact of the carbon market has had on the focus on sustainable practices?
I think it's created a need and desire from our downstream partners to get connected to that market. Most importantly for them, it goes back to how they're reporting, how they're accountable to whatever their goals are. So whether it's science-based targets through the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, various other goals that they may have set, whether they're official or unofficial internally. And really what that's created is an outlet to start to claim and report against those reductions and removals.
So are most of your customers, do they want the reporting side of it, that you guys have the details, then they don't have to do the details, and then they can get the carbon credit, et cetera, but also have the tracking behind it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a pretty simple way to explain it. I think they understand, especially our close partners understand. There's a lot more that goes into it than that. But yes, at the end of the day, that's what's important. That's what brings value to them.
Gotcha.
So we've got the carbon credit market, which is what we're not here to talk about today. We're going to talk more specifically, Laura, about the sustainable supply chain. So can you kind of define that for us?
Yeah, sure. So, you know, our partnership with Truterra started in 2018, and it was really driven by a couple of things. Our desire to be a sustainability leader, as well as customer driven. So we have downstream customers that then also enroll in our program with Truterra. So we're all in. We buy 1.2 million acres, equivalent of 1.2 million acres every year of corn. And so we've enrolled that entire total in our Truterra program. And then we have customers that are also enrolled that have access to that data that Greg kind of referred to. So, you know, it's about ensuring our positioning as a sustainability leader. It's about giving our customers what they need, whether that's data, storytelling, et cetera. Having a credible partner like Truterra, we know they have Land O'Lakes is the largest farmer-owned co-op in the United States, so there's a lot of credibility there. And it's about understanding and de-risking our supply chain, right? We know these practices help to ensure that we'll have a supply of corn for 100 more years, right? And so it's about making sure that we're investing in the communities that we're buying corn from, in the growers that we're buying corn from, and ensuring that it's reliable for years to come.
So from the farmer's perspective, I look and I get carbon from a lot of different angles from so many different companies, and it kind of gets murky for me to see. What made you choose Truterra?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really that connection with the grower. They're doing it the right way, right? They're working through the retailer, which is already a trusted partner of the grower. We know they have that credibility. They have boots on the ground that are actually helping to educate, to spread the word. They have the right tools. We wanted to make sure that we weren't just throwing money at a solution. It was actually the right solution.
And Greg, that's what Truterra is doing, is you're kind of monitoring and evaluating that process, the sustainable practices that are going into, for their case, the corn that they're buying.
Correct. And if I were to answer your question, I would have said, let's flip the camera around and look in this room.
Yeah.
That's it right there. That's exactly what we're trying
full
to
room.
connect. Yeah. So from what we call upstream all the way to downstream. So most of what's in the audience today is upstream. So that's where everything starts. And then we want to take that downstream. And some of our partners that are in the room, that means to them all the way to the consumer. So what are they buying off the retail shelf, whatever your chosen grocery store is?
So when you are helping do the reporting and the monitoring, what qualifies? How do we determine what a regenerative or a sustainable practice is?
I mean, it boils down to one of three really that we're tracking. So if you're low or no-till, you're going to a cover crop, or we talked about nutrient management today out on the field day, I would say one of those three practices would be what we're interested in capturing.
And that's anywhere in the U.S.
Yes, you could track that anywhere in the U.S. Our focus is on the row crop, so it kind of excludes some of that part of what we're working on, but yes.
Good. The other interesting part that we've learned about during the conversations that we've had is just how you've been able to bridge that gap between the farmers and these companies like Primient. How far back has Truterra been working on putting a program like this together?
Oh gosh, I think that the first one was 2019, I believe, is when the program was inked. So it's evolved over time into, like everything else. Anyone that's been around this space knows that you let a couple of months go by and things are different, whether it's a protocol has changed or they've established science-based targets, which forces you to look at and track different parts of that business. But from 2019, there has been a significant evolution in that program.
So one of the things that I ask everybody, we're Farm for Profit podcast. We're always talking about profitability for the farmer downstream, and we asked this down at Commodity Classic to the Truterra guys, and we did, and yes, there's profitability there, and we talked that. How about what I'm seeing in the crowd here is maybe the middle stream vendors. Is there profitability for them as well?
Now, just before he jumps into that, I don't want to get our upstream, middle stream, downstream
There you go.
mixed up, because in one instance, Primient is downstream, correct?
Yep.
And in another instant, the farmer is downstream.
Yep.
So not to get too confused, you're talking more on the farmer's side of it.
Yes, correct.
So upstream is what we would say.
What you would say, yeah,
Yep.
got it.
So the answer is yes. I mean, there's opportunities for growers in the room to help mitigate some of that, is what
Okay.
we would say. So I think it's really hard because especially those in the room know that what we've talked about, some of these regenerative practices are notoriously expensive. There's a lot of risk that goes into that. So really what you find is opportunities to mitigate some of that. What we're doing is not going to cover the entire cost of that. It can't. But what we hope is that when it's done right, it generates an opportunity for them to increase their yields, increase their profitability through some, middle part of a mitigated strategy within that risk.
I think something that's important to point out, and one of the reasons why we love working with Truterra, is that their program is a bit of a choose your own adventure. We know that one size does not fit all on the ground, right? I mean, there's variability even just in the Midwest when it comes to row cropping, right? We were out on the field today. We learned about how, you really kind of have to have this decision tree in your head. If this, then that. I mean, the weather changes everything, right? So in terms of driving profitability, Truterra gives their growers the tools to be able to figure out what's right for my field, not for everyone. It's not plant a cover crop or else. It's do what's right for you, increase your profitability, increase your yield, ensure that you can pass your land on to the next generation. I mean, that's the credibility that they have, and that's why they're a trusted partner of growers and then also of us, right? Through that entire value chain, to use another term.
Yes, we'll just keep adding those up. Exactly.
Well, I think too. I mean, so if you look at LinkedIn, you track some of these big companies that have big goals out there. It looks like it's easy when it's posted in an article on LinkedIn, and I think that's why we want to bring our partners all the way across that value chain to events like Field Day, because you find out it's really not that easy. And within anything that's not easy, it requires work, it requires money. All of those things have to go, and they have to be just right to get the results that you need to be able to do to find that end result.
And like you said, Laura, I can tell as a farmer, it's every year is not the same. Last year we tried to plant and we had like 15 inches of rain. We went to strip till, so reduced tillage, and it was our first year. We were really excited to do it, and all of a sudden, after about 10 inches of that 15, they just washed out, or they sealed over, and we actually had to go in with some tillage. We had to pivot, I guess. We didn't want to, but if we didn't, we weren't going to have a crop because we couldn't get it in. So it's very valuable to be able to pivot and know that the farmer, it's not the same every year. Yes, we want to do something, but sometimes we can't. One thing I learned yesterday in our call before this was I heard the term supply shed, and I don't think that means what I think of when I think of a supply shed, because usually I'm going to get seed or tools or something like that. What's the supply shed?
Yeah, so for us, it's the area where we're sourcing corn, right? So we primarily source from Illinois and Indiana, so that's our supply shed, right? And when it comes to greenhouse gas accounting, I mean, we could get in the weeds on all of that, but we have to ensure that we target those areas when it comes to building this Truterra program and ensuring that we're, you can't trace a grain of corn, so you can't ensure that every single grain is enrolled in a Truterra program, but we're trying to shift the whole industry, right? So we target our supply shed, we ensure that we're shifting mindsets, educating, ensuring that we're driving those changes in that area.
Can't trace it yet. Maybe in the future.
But that was something that we, and Corey and Dave and I had thought about, because 1 bushel of corn raised conventionally, just to use a term, and one raised with Corey's strip till practices, I wouldn't be able to physically identify a difference in what that bushel of corn looked like. So why is it so important to Primient to work on these sustainable practices?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to just ensuring that there's corn available for us to continue to be a business, right? I mean, you have to invest in your supply shed, right, to ensure that there's healthy soil, that there's, these practices are continuing to allow farmers to pass down their fields for generations. And it's just about risk for us. It's about carbon for our customers. And it's just about doing it the right way.
Yeah, it's interesting, because when we get some of the emails from our listener base, the producer side, to where it almost sometimes feels like they're being pushed and forced into a direction that they didn't want to go, because it's not the way they'd done it before. It's not the way they're currently doing it. And as we mentioned, it's expensive potentially to switch when you're upgrading and changing your equipment. And to realize that it's not to force the change, it's to entice and push the direction of sustainable, and so we can be here for much, much longer as far as the predictability of crops goes. So Corey, as you think about what she's mentioned already, you think of a producer like yourself, how can this impact you as more companies come on board and that supply shed grows?
Well, I mean, I'm farming for profit, right? And that's what our podcast is, right? So I'm looking for ways to add to my bottom line. And if I can there's several ways to do that, right? Some years, the cost of the carbon credit, I don't know what a carbon credit is now worth.
It depends. It's growing.
I mean, I heard anything from $20 to $50 an acre. But some years, that's all we make. So if that's, and those are not very good years, but if you can double what you're making in a year, I mean, that's incentive to me.
What direction do you have for Corey as a farmer of things that you're looking for the supply shed in practice-wise?
I would say that there isn't a demand to do any particular practice. I mean, we want to shift practices the right way over time. It doesn't have to be all at once. We want to trust you to make the right decisions for your field that hopefully begin to sequester carbon and do some of these things, ensure that there's healthy soil for years to come, but we don't want to mandate a specific practice.
Is there anything specific in the corn, like an attribute of the corn that you're looking for to put in that shed other than just being sustainably farmed?
We buy dent corn, so I mean that's
Okay.
that's specifically what's in our program. But other than that, I mean, good quality crop, yeah, absolutely.
Very good.
One of the big complaints I hear from some of my farmer friends that say they've been no-till since the 80s. And what's the word I'm looking for?
The rule of
The
additionality.
rule of additionality. Is there ever going to be something to award those guys for they've been doing the right thing for a long time?
I think yes. I mean, I think there will be. There's other options to do that. Some of the nutrient management programs we talked about. I think, going back to your original question to Corey was, I think it's about education, right? We want to make sure that if you're going to be a part of this program, that you're doing it the right way. The last thing anyone in this room that's on either the retailer side or the Truterra side would want is for you to try something and it go terribly wrong, because that's obviously not good for business for anyone, including yourself.
Yep.
But I think that would be my answer. It's work with the retailer network, conservation agronomist, and do it the right way. And if it takes 2 years to do it right, or you start small and it takes 10 years to get it all the way across your entire operation, that's okay.
Yep.
So in your role, Greg, you're working with partners like Primient. You are constantly exploring new relationships, and how much of your role is explaining to those partners what farmers are doing responsibly already?
I try my best. I am still new to the ag world, so I lean on all of the other Truterra, well, I can't say Truterra hats because there's 1,000 of them. All the other Truterra name badges in the room is who I rely on. So that's the really cool thing about Truterra, is that we have the subject matter expertise to be able to bring that to our partners like Primient and help them, whether it's carbon specific, whether it is agronomic advice. We spent half a day yesterday talking about just some agronomic updates that are going on within each region. And every partner has supply sheds that are scattered across the country. So it's valuable to connect to those, because that allows Laura to go and tell a story that says, hey, we should think about this because we're sourcing primarily from Illinois and Indiana, and we know that X, Y, and Z happened this year, and that could really make an impact on yield and other things.
And then that helps us to kind of take it to our downstream customers, which are the consumer brands that, it then passes to the consumer. So there's a lot of in between, right? There's the upstream, the downstream, the in
Yes.
between, to use all of your words, right? So Truterra helps us learn that through events like this, where we're on the field, we're hearing from the growers, we're hearing from their agronomy experts, and we're able to kind of tell that story all the way through so the consumers can make the right decisions based on all the correct information, right?
We always have a challenge in our episodes at the end for our listeners. I think that the challenge today should be someone needs to send us a map of our stream and label out where everybody is.
I was just
from-
thinking a
from
stream
up to
turns
down.
into a river, and a river turns into a lake,
Ocean.
and eventually gets to the ocean. What happens when it
Tributaries.
gets all one? We're all one.
I got a question for you. Out there today in the field, you just talked about being out there. I heard the word regenerative. And then, so being in agriculture, I go to conferences all the time, and I hear regenerative and I hear sustainability. Do you have like a clear definition of the difference between them? Is sustainability just the overbearing process? Or
It's all the same.
It's all the same?
It's all the same. And to the grower, it's about, making sure that their land is sustainable for years to come. It's, we heard the word conservation yesterday. It's all the same stuff. It's just the practices that ensure that we're able to continue doing this.
Very good.
How are you ensuring that going to no-till or reduced nutrients is actually in the positive? Like, are you guys going out and taking soil samples? Is it a university that's telling you how much that carbon it's sequestering?
Yeah, so there is some of that. There's soil sampling that is going to tell us what the carbon result is that we can then share back to our partners. But, again, the how behind that, I think, still goes back to connecting with that conservation agronomist and ensuring that as you do that, you're implementing that in the right way. That should yield better profitability for you, better yield for you.
So you'll have boots on the ground that's checking that. Nice.
I want to go back to being able to identify not only for the partners that are in the room, but then also the producers that will be listening to this, that we've used the term supply shed. And you mentioned where you source the corn for Primient from. But Greg, you've got several corporate partners that are working with you. Would Corey know, if he's enrolled in Truterra's program, that his grain is in a supply shed for a company, or would he know any of that information?
I think it depends. If there's interest there, I think we could help connect that. There's some that are really interested in understanding where that goes, and there's others that what I want to focus on is my per bushel. What am I making on this? Where it goes beyond that may not matter, but to some it does. And I think that's changed, or even, so I've been a part of Truterra going on 2 years now, and I think even that mentality has changed a little bit with the producers, that people are starting to ask and want to understand and be a part of connecting in rooms like this to all the way downstream.
So you're asking like country of origin labeling, basically,
Almost, yeah.
like the beef industry.
Because it's not necessarily the physical delivery of the bushel to Primient.
Right.
You're still getting your bushels of grain the way you always have. You're just identifying that within your supply shed, so many acres, so many bushels were grown with these types of practices.
Right, and that we're investing in those acres essentially, right? And Truterra is able to give us down to the county level, this is your area. And then when we have downstream customers enrolled, they're assigned a specific area. So we have the traceability of it. And I mean, certainly the grower could too if they're interested.
Could you expand on what investing in those acres means from the Primient side of things?
Yeah, I mean, so we invest with Truterra, and then Truterra is able to give access to their expertise as well as their tool to these growers so that they're able to choose their own adventure. That's kind of my favorite way to describe it, right?
Yeah. It's just like a true spoken Iowa State University fan. That's the slogan for those students enrolling at Iowa State is choose your adventure.
Yeah. So if
I
I'm
heard a couple Snickers. We got a couple.
We got a couple.
if I'm a company, I'm looking to offset some carbon. I mean, how do I go about, getting in and doing that?
They should auction it off. I should auction.
You should auction off.
Start a platform. We're just
Is
You're
there?
gonna be auctioning carbon. That's a new one.
We could do it.
That's interesting.
I mean, is there
gonna
like a
have to cut-
Chicago Board of Trade setting the price, or how's that?
We're going to have to cut
all
that out of the podcast so nobody steals that.
I know, right?
You put a stamp on that. How would you get involved? I would encourage you, if you're interested in it, I know we talked a little bit about this today, I would go to our website at truterra.com, and there's a quick few questions that you can answer to potentially get signed up on what our next round of offering is going to look like.
Did I miss it? Was there a deadline? Is it, you said another round. As we sit here at the end of July, the episode will come out during August. As those picking up this file later, I want to kind of timestamp that. Is there an open and close date, or is it you sign up and it just flows continuously?
So full transparency, when I said that, I knew you were going to ask that, and I don't know the answer to it. I should have written it down, so that's 100% on me, but I will get you that information, and then you can talk about that on the next
I
next
love that.
podcast.
Corey, you got homework.
How
That's
do
right.
How do I? If I'm a company, how do I even know how much carbon I'm producing that I need to offset?
If you are on the downstream side,
Somewhere on the stream. If I want to offset carbon credits, but I
You're
don't
in
know.
the
I mean,
middle of the highway.
'cause I'm just a
grower or
farmer.
yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I'm just interested.
I would say however much you feel like you want. That would be your own goal. So Laura has corporate goals that she's working on, and you might have your own self-imposed goals that you want to
But
aim for.
I think what Corey's asking, if I'm Whitaker Marketing Group, I'm Google. How do I know how much I need to offset to put that stamp on my website that says carbon neutral?
Yeah, I mean, there's a handful of greenhouse gas accounting practices. We've hired consultants to help us with that, but there's an average greenhouse gas per kilogram, essentially, for anything that you're buying, any kind of agricultural product, chemical, anything. So there's practices that help
And this
you
is
estimate.
all like you elect to do this yourself now. It's not mandated or anything like that.
It's not mandated. No, not in the U.S. I mean, there's certainly possibility of being more mandating on the reporting side of it. And then in Europe, there's a lot more pressure. We don't operate in Europe, so I can't really speak to that piece of it. But it's all voluntary, and it's all about the
So
reputation
you think
of the
by
organization.
leading in the industry, you're going to get ahead of that.
Yeah, exactly.
possibility, yeah.
And I mean, the consumers are demanding it, right? So then it's coming upstream to us. So the consumers care about sustainability. They're putting pressure on our customers, and then it just kind of goes back from there.
Can you talk a little bit more about that type of pressure that comes from the consumer side? Because now we're even further down the stream when we get to the end product. Because Primient's corn purchased goes into different products that are then sold again to a consumer level.
Yeah, so I mean, the consumers obviously hear a lot about sustainability. I think that's something that you see on the shelves all the time, the net zero on a product or something like that, right? So they're putting pressure on a lot of these really big brands who are our customers to build a program that's credible, right? And so they care about that. Our customers are telling their stories, the consumer brands that are on the shelves in Target, Walmart, et cetera. And so, they come to us for the data primarily, right? And ensuring that we're doing it credibly. And so there's other certifications and things like that.
I think just like we talked about with you, as you consider maybe going into some of these new practices, there's education that's required to go and do that the right way. I think for us on the supplier side, and we're part of Land O'Lakes, so we're involved in that too, it's education for us all the way down to the consumer. It might even be education to the retailer of why certain things are going to look differently, why there might be some sort of premium associated with that. So it's education all the way from the consumer to the top, and then vice versa all the way down to. I think that's really the opportunity for everyone in this room to band together.
Yeah, and that was kind of the goal of the entire conversation today. Is our audience on the Farm for Profit podcast has had access to understanding carbon credits, the program itself. We've had a great opportunity with Truterra at Commodity Classic to do a little bit of educating as to what the impact can be. And then we've also talked about what some of the agronomic advantages are to the products or to the practices themselves. We've never explored the conversation as to why it's important and why it's being influenced. So it's kind of neat to see it go full circle and put a package like this together. But as Truterra is looking to the future of the programs, there's going to be continued monitoring, I would assume. But what could you share with our listeners today about the continued growth of relationships with those looking to source their products that way?
I think their goals are going to become increasingly more important as we hit certain timeline commitments that they've made. So I think you're going to see some of that come, and you hate to say it, but some of it's going to come from desperation. Some of it's going to come from those that were maybe later in that process of establishing what those goals are. So they may feel like they're a little bit behind and need to play catch up. I think what's important to know, we said we're not going to talk a lot about carbon. We did talk a little bit about it for your benefit, which is great. But I think at the end of the day, carbon is going to ebb and flow a little bit. We don't know. Maybe it's going to spike up and then level off. But I think what's important about what Truterra is trying to do is connect. And I know there was a station today that said we're not allowed to say soil health because there's so many different degrees. I don't have that agronomic knowledge to be able to share. So I'm going to stick with soil health for now. I'll take my punishment later. But I truly think that's what it's all about. It's the regenerative practices that are leading to a resilient supply chain that we can connect our companies to.
Laura, you talked about data just a second ago. I'm a big data guy, and every conference I've been to lately, I can't leave the conference without somebody mentioning artificial intelligence. Just thinking into the future randomly, how is artificial intelligence going to affect the data for sustainability?
I'd almost push that back to Greg because I feel like there's a lot of opportunity for data collection to be potentially enhanced in that sense, right?
Yeah, I think you get into more of the automation type of conversations, but at the end of the day, you're still collecting, data that has to be validated by you or the trusted advisor. So I still think that there's going to require that human element in this space, at least for the foreseeable future. But from an automation, speed to market from maybe connection point of Truterra to one of our partners, I think maybe you could see some of that.
Okay.
So for those that were unable to attend today, those that are picking up this file later on, we had 5 different stations that we could stop at. We had reduced tillage and yield contributions. We had changes in equipment as far as important for advancing soil health, which is probably where we can't say or shouldn't say. Should change our phrasing a little bit. I could say, yeah. Cover crops, not necessarily working everywhere. Manure playing a role within the soil health and structure itself. And it was a very informative day when you got to track from one spot to the next spot and so on. I'm curious, as you guys took in some of the presentations today, what stuck out from being out in the field?
Yeah, I think it's just about, I'm new to the ag space. I've worked in sustainability, but only been with Primient for about a year and a half. So still learning what those practices are. And I think something that clicked for me today is really just like the decision tree that has to go on in the grower's head of like, if it rains this, if it doesn't rain, then this, and all the different practices and the amount of management that it takes and the thought that it takes. I think we have to educate our downstream to help them understand that it's really risky to the grower, and that's why there's hesitation and there's not this mass adoption, because we know at the end it's great in theory once you kind of get over the hump, but it's scary to kind of take that first step. And so I think that really clicked for me today.
I would say it was reinforcement of the need and the value of a trusted advisor, someone to walk with you in the field and pull that chunk of soil up or pull that root up and look and help someone understand who may not have thought, one small thing could really make an impact to an entire yield or entire crop that you have that you're working on. So it was just a reinforcement reminder of the value of that partnership and what it can mean.
Corey, you always save questions for the end. What have you been sitting on?
I think I got all mine. I was going to just tell you what I kind of learned out of the field day because
Go right
I
ahead.
enjoyed it. I haven't got to many this summer. I thought it was pretty cool in the tillage one, seeing the root ball from no-till, first year no-till to tilled and seeing that smear and that. I thought that was pretty cool. When you can actually touch and feel in just 1 year, that's pretty cool.
That is the big difference of being on site at a field day is you can take a trusted advisor's word for it, but there's so much more of a true belief comes when you can actually see what the practice is doing for the benefit of your field.
And I would take that all the way to our partners too. I think them seeing what's required to do it the right way and be effective with that makes it a different type of conversation when they say, hey, we'd like to be a part of a cover crop project or a no-till project. And great, well, here's some things to understand. And seeing that live, it takes some of that pressure of that back and forth off because they've seen it firsthand.
Right.
I do got one.
Okay, hold on to that. Hold on to that because I'm going to prep. I want to prep the group that we have here too. If you have questions for Laura or Greg, I'm going to pop my headphones off. Go ahead and raise your hand. I'll come out and grab your question as well, and we'll have Corey continue here with this.
So, Illinois, Indiana is mainly the supply shed right now. We're talking corn and soybean country mainly, right? And that's all what the supply shed has in it right now. Am I correct in saying that for you guys?
For
For
Primient?
Primient?
For Primient, we're buying corn. Yeah.
And
that's it.
Truterra, are you going wheat? Are you going on more crops than that?
Yeah, so our primary focus would be corn, soybeans, wheat, and cotton.
Okay.
Yeah.
But there's obviously, there's forestry, there's turf, there's a lot of other industries. Are you guys going to expand into that? There's a lot of carbon out there to get.
Yes, we'd like to continue
Okay.
to expand for sure.
That was my question.
That was a good question. I like that. But I'm throwing the headphones back on because I think we've answered all of the audience's questions as well. I didn't see
I just
any-
had lunch. You're all taking a little nap.
didn't have any hands pop up there. So the other fun thing that we like to do on all of our podcasting episodes is we create a summary show. So about every quarter, sometimes every 6 months, we ask all the guests, 2 shows a week, the same question. And then we are able to pool our experts' answers and throw that into a summary. So what this episode falls into is our question that states, if the 2 of you were able to go back and stand next to yourself at age 18, you're a teenager, not going to listen to yourself maybe, but what would you say if you could go back at age 18? Because we've got a large pool of young producers that listen and enjoy the podcast, and our goal is to put a good episode together that summarizes what everybody wishes they'd have known at that age. So be thinking about that. Listeners, we thank you so much for hanging out with us during this podcast recording. Everybody here, we thank you for coming to the field day. What a unique experience that we got to have, and we escaped the heat over lunch. So it turned out to be really fantastic. We learned that Primient has nearly 1.2 million acres of corn procured using these sustainable or regenerative type practices as identified in a partnership through Truterra. And Truterra identifies that using their insight score and their sustainability tools to be able to identify just exactly where in the supply shed we were getting this information from. And I'm not even going to try to summarize where at on the stream everything
It's a lesson in hydraulics.
fell today.
We'll leave behind a glossary of terms for you.
Yes, absolutely. Check the show notes, right? But it was interesting to me, and I think to the rest of this room, how it's getting from consumer through Primient and the partners with Truterra, and then from Truterra to other partners in the room that eventually make it back to the producer that's putting the practices together. We talked that sustainable and regenerative are pretty much the same thing as far as practices and definitions go, and that more importantly, this is going to be here for time to come. As consumers continue to demand these practices, and it's passed up through the supply chain itself, that ultimately will create more and more incentives for farmers like Corey to adopt the practices or at least get educated as to how these practices may benefit the bottom line in their operation. So as that goes, I was trying to professionally stall so you could think about what would you go back and tell yourself at age 18?
I got one. I can jump in. I'll simplify it. I mean, I think just enjoy the failures. I think that's where you learn. And I think when you're young and starting out, it seems really scary when you start to hit some hurdles. But that's where you look back and you've had the most growth.
That's good.
My boss is in the room, so I don't know if I can really go back and share something. No. I think don't be scared to try something different. And I think that really applies to many different things. It applies to a practice change you might be interested in making. It applies to me jumping and trying something different, like sustainable agriculture, coming from just a food service sales guy and trying something different. So I wish I would have tried something different sooner, I guess.
I love that. Corey, I'm always going to tax you with the challenge for our listeners today.
Dave wrote it down.
But, are you ready for a challenge, Dave? That was
actually-
another question.
I had an after show question.
You've got a
is what I-
Corey-style
I have a
question?
Corey-style question.
Okay, you asked your question. Corey, you got to think of the challenge.
Okay.
All right. So Tanner just alluded that customers are demanding this practice. So here's our after hours question. How are they learning to demand this? Are they being taught this, or what's pushing? What's driving customers to even demand these practices? If we haven't had it for years and years, what's the push?
I think it's seeing a lot of climate implications in real time. I think we're all seeing a lot of things. I mean, droughts and wildfires and tons of things that are just happening in real time. And then educating themselves and understanding. We have a lot of climate science out there that's showing that we need to do something to ensure that we can keep doing this. And I think that's where it kind of drills down to.
Gotcha.
That's a good answer.
My challenge is kind of on the lines of that. I'm going to talk more to the listeners probably than the people in the room. So more of the grower side of things is to just open your mind. A lot of times we get this carbon stuff coming at us, and its change is very scary, especially when we're sometimes just barely getting by. But open your mind and think about why some of these programs are in place, who that's affecting, and I think it's not just being pushed on there. I think you can find some agronomic benefits as well. Like I know we have on our farm.
I liked it. That was a good challenge. And I'm going to end the episode for the listeners, and then I've got a challenge for those in the room today. So, listeners, we appreciate you diving into this. Don't be afraid to send ideas to us at farmforprofitllc@gmail.com. But until next time, have a good one.